Hey everybody, welcome to Rumors versus Facts. My name is Roddy Nabulsi. I am joined by not Jed May. We don't have him on there, but Trent Smallwood and Lance McCurley, and of course our friends at the Rogue Shop. You can see some of their fun stuff in the upper right corner there. Their watermelon, blue, and blue raspberries, mango flavored stuff. Their chocolate flavored stuff. They have a bunch of good stuff out there, and we got to mention them right off the bat because they sponsor Rumors versus Facts. And I just came back from seeing my son. It wasn't actually vacation. He was working out. He was swimming in the ocean. Full OCP, ready for the dive. It was the first full day. And my best friend down there has had insomnia since I've known her the past 3 months. She has not had insomnia. Road shot. Bulldogs 10. BOTS 1-0. Out to Ollie. Fucking combat dive.
Can't really hear you.
Yeah, you're kind of wonky.
Is it any better if I move the mic closer to me?
Yes.
Yeah, that's better. I think I missed about 75% of that.
Oh, that's great. Well, I was just kind of saying our friends at the Rogue Shop are the reasons that we have this show. So I appreciate them, and I appreciate them setting up my friend Cheryl down in Orange Beach. Well, she's in Pensacola. She can now sleep where she could not sleep for the first 50 years I've known her. And now she sleeps well for the last 3 months. So big weekend. I was watching my son get ready for dive school, but you guys were covering this whole thing. 14 official visitors in town. Let's put them on the screen here. Just an absolute crazy weekend. You had Ryan Montgomery, the quarterback commit, Bo Walker, the running back commit, both tight end commits, Ethan Barber and Elias Williams. And I remember a few months ago, we were talking about maybe Elias Williams not even being in this class because he could flip, but he seems super solid now. Darren Nagabon, never know how to say it. It was the fifth commit there. But let's go to you, Trent. Tell me about one of these uncommitted guys. We got a lot to go through on the show. There's a ton of updates at UGASports.com on the vault. But I want you to pick one of those guys and tell me kind of what you thought of his trip and how it may have helped Georgia.
I guess we can start off with what everybody wants to talk about is Justice Terry. Y'all know my feelings on Justice Terry. I've known him since day one. I didn't think he would flip to begin with, and at the end of the day, I think he's going to be in this class. I think Georgia did exactly what they stuck to schedule. They didn't throw all their eggs in their basket, from the start, and they've just kind of eased it in, went over some academic stuff, and hit that area when he was on campus. The whole barber aspect, and so
yeah.
I think Georgia did a great job, kind of displaying, putting on display what the academics could look like when he. If he elected to come to Athens, I think, the vibe and everything has always been there. That's the reason why he committed in the first place, the relationships, the vibe. I think he was just looking, the academic standpoint, just continuing to build those relationships. And I think Georgia did a great job there. Georgia's not looking to flip him right now. I've said that since day one. They're looking to land a signature, and that'll ultimately come down to December, and I think this is going to be a marathon. It's not going to be a sprint. Definitely, I think he's going to take his official visits. But don't be surprised if he's back on campus at Georgia again before the summer's over.
I'm just not with you, and that's not you. You've known way more about recruiting than I have ever since you started. How long have you been with us? Good Lord.
I don't know when did you start.
I'm about to say we're getting into a decade here, man. It's been a long time, but I'm just thinking that Justice Terry and Isaiah Gibson and Elijah Grimm. I was pessimistic. I'm just too pessimistic by nature. Yesterday, you guys saw it in the group chat. Georgia Tech beats UNC or to get into the finals with Georgia in the baseball regional. I'm like, it would just be the Georgia thing of all time for Georgia Tech, who has not beaten Georgia in the regular season, to beat Georgia 2 games and take this regional and be in the super regional. Just the Munsonitis in me just came out. And I was like, and 10 innings, shout out to the Diamond Dogs, huge win. But hey, y'all were nervous too, so don't act like it was just me.
Yeah.
But my point is, seeing what is this bumper crop, this ridiculous crop of defensive players in this, it's just too perfect. And I just don't know that Georgia could pull that off. It's just, I'm too pessimistic. So, Lance, talk me off the edge, because with a couple guys already committed out of state, I'm just thinking, can you flip both of them back? That seems a lot to me.
Well, I mean, I'm going to take the opposite stance you, and I think it can be done. Another guy that I'm looking to go see this week is also committed to USC, defensive lineman, outside linebacker. They rotate him around different spots, is Isaiah Gibson. He's been at Georgia twice in the last 3 weekends. When I went to go see him on the update I had in early May, about a month ago, he told me that, once he committed, he had to go back in his phone records and look, but like he said Kirby texted me within like 30 minutes, but he was definitely one of the first coaches, if not the first coach, to text me. And, Trent kind of took the words right out of my mouth. Is like, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And it's only to check, it's June now. So, this is one of those kids that, I think Jed boosted him up the ratings, in the recent re-rankings. And I mean, he
jumped up to 151.
Yeah. I mean, he's a definite one. I don't know where he was previous, but I know that he had a pretty substantial jump. And he's 6'5", 240, and he's all of that and a hell of a lot more when you see him up in person. And there's a reason he's number 8 right now at his position. In my opinion, maybe a little bit higher, but I heard some good things from around the Warner Robins program just about his visit, and getting him on campus 2 out of 3 weeks, getting him on. He's 2 hours away from Athens, so getting him up here for the scavenger hunt was pretty cool. And I'd imagine it's the it's kind of the same this past weekend, and he already has those relationships here, but it's just one of those things where they just got to keep chipping away. And I think that they have a good possibility to land him in this class as well as Terry.
And here's another thing on we talk about NIL and Georgia not bidding after guys and getting in these bidding wars. But there's one thing that Kirby Smart will always where he's going to put his money at is it's going to be in the front 7 on the defense side of the ball. He's going to get his defensive backs. We saw that last year, last class, and he's going to get his offensive linemen. So I would be more skeptical about wide receivers and that position, maybe even quarterbacks, than it would be, on the defensive line, especially in-state guys.
Yeah,
I don't think he's going to bow down necessarily when it comes to that, because he knows where games have won. He knows where games have won for the past, however many years he's been there, and that's where his success lies. And when he has a class like this and they're in-state, I don't think he's going to lose it from that standpoint.
I agree with you, and I don't, only because the only reason I don't think that Georgia could get all 3 of them would be an NIL issue. I think if this was pre-NIL and you saw that run-up Kirby had, wins 2 titles and just that momentum going into, if we were still in the non-NIL era, wanting to go play for what a lot of people say is the new Alabama, wanting to go play for the most successful active college football coach, I could definitely see the in-state guys going there. The buzz around Georgia's fashionable, Georgia's hot. Kids want to play there, and we saw with certain players in the past. have decided that it's more fashionable to go to Ohio State or Clemson or someplace like that. It was cool to go out of state, showed you were a national recruit. And I'm not just going to the one in your backyard. Mm-hmm. Georgia's past that. But when you've got – because, I put Elijah Griffin in there, not just these two. That's a trio that you're trying to get, plus a bunch of other guys. If you go all in to get Elijah Griffin, he's a difference maker. Justice Terry is a difference maker. Isaiah Gibson, when you see the pictures, Lance, that you took, you're right. He just looks night and day bigger and stronger and faster than anybody on the field. All three of these are just, I don't call them day one players because you can't say that about a Kirby Smart team. Somewhere else, maybe, yes, but not at Georgia. I'm just thinking you go all in, like you say, he's going to build from the inside out. He always spends a little extra on his defensive backs. But, man, each one of those is a knockdown, drag-out fight with all the teams in the country. So I guess that's why I'm hesitant to say, yeah, Georgia's going to flip these two and get Elijah Griffin.
I think if you
weirdly, I'm more, like you said about the wide receivers, you'd be more skeptical there. I'm more confident about Georgia getting the top two wide receivers in the state.
Yeah, and I'm more, and I've said this too. I think Justice Terry and Elijah Griffin are the two that I really put in that when I'm discussing the defensive line. I think Isaiah Gibson, he would be a great add. I'm nothing against him, but I do think if Kirby could pick two of these and say, hey, I'm going to NIL is going to go towards these two. If you had your pick, I think it would be your two defensive linemen because, you're looking at two guys that could end up being first-round picks in 3 to 4 years. So, Isaiah Gibson could very well be there too. But I think defensive line is where Georgia would you take these two guys and just could you imagine them running their little nickel set with those two guys in the middle rushing the passer and then two speed guys on the outside? That's just ridiculous. And I think that's the focus, those two.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Let's bring up another guy that hasn't made a decision yet but was in town for a visit. You just went to see him, Lance. Tell us a little bit about Kevin Wynn because we're talking defensive tackles. And I can see, again, not getting all three. Maybe Isaiah's the odd man out because Georgia goes after those two. But where does Kevin Wynn fit into all this? Because he's not as big as those other guys, but Georgia seems to really want him.
Of
course. Your thoughts on him after going to see him?
Yeah, he told me that he could play, anywhere from a 7-tech to a nose tackle today. When I went and talked to him in person, and he even mentioned he was like, man, everyone else is like 6'5", 6'7", something like that, but like they really want me, and they want me at multiple different positions, in their defensive scheme, and they kind of laid it out for him, where he would fit in at, and I believe that he truly. I think Georgia and probably South Carolina right now are like 1A, 1B. I don't know. I'd put Georgia on first after that visit, but of course, he's visiting South Carolina in a few weeks. But this is one that I've covered. This is a kid that I've covered for the past 3 years, and now heading into his senior year working with y'all. I've been kind of high on him. I didn't even realize he was a 4-star until today. I should have looked at the re-rankings a little bit better, but he's one of those kids that's very twitchy and very fast. And man, it's fun to see him play live too. Cause he's playing in the smallest division in the state, but he just dominates with just his ability to just maul through offensive lines.
Could you imagine the depth chart Kirby releases with if you landed those three in-state defensive linemen? They'd be everywhere. All three of those are versatile enough to play all three positions on the defensive line. Who knows where each one of them would be each week? Kirby could just play with the people every week with the depth chart. This guy's my starting nose tackle. This guy's my starting defensive tackle. And the next week, just reverse it. So all three of those guys are extremely athletic, and you could move them around, and you could really build something special with this in-state defensive line class.
I would love to see them run that amoeba front, when all the guys are standing up. And usually we see that with speedsters, right? We see that with the lighter. You don't do it with a heavy set. You imagine you got 900 pounds of defensive tackles out there, and they're just kind of meandering back and forth until right before the ball snapped.
I just imagine going back to taking these three guys and putting them on the offense down on the goal line. You talk about lining them up in a wishbone or something like that, and just
That's what him and I talked today too, just about what he might do with this high school team this year. Don't want to give away any of their secrets, but imagine they gave him a comparison of Jalen Carter. It's a little bit shorter, but I mean they really, really like his ability to like I said, just kind of get into the backfield and just run east, west, north, and south. So
I'm with you there. I like this comment from Eric Ray. Says Wynn gives me Devontae Wyatt vibes.
Yeah, I can see that. And
again, it was Devontae Wyatt, Jalen Carter, Big Jordan Davis, guys. I mean, remember Devontae Wyatt running the ball in high school. I'm with you there. It's like, okay, goal line. Let's bring in that heavy package and let him be a fullback. Just come through there and demolish somebody.
And I think that this is a kid that Georgia's, wasn't real high on at first, but since he's visited and they've gone to see him. So they're definitely putting interest in him.
All right.
Oh, it's all about your camp the summer before and how you maintain.
Yes.
Until you sign, because that's what they're looking at. I mean, what you do as a sophomore and what you do as a junior is good and all, but if you ain't ready and you don't have your body in tune the summer before your senior year and you don't keep it in tune, it's going to be hard for you to have a spot.
Also, your willingness to come in and camp.
Yep.
Some of these guys, top candidates around the country, are like, yeah, I'll come visit. And they're like, hey, we'd like you to work out. Nah, man, I'm too big for that. You either want me or you don't. And Georgia doesn't play that. They're like, look, you need to come work out. You need to come run 40. We want to height weights again. We want to see what you can do. And there have been a couple guys who have, I don't say big for their britches. They just decided, look, I don't need to work out. If you take me or don't, but I'm not going to work out for you. Georgia moves on because, again, they offered you as a sophomore. You camped after your sophomore year. They want to see you camp after your junior year. You said going into your senior year, we won't see what you can do. That's not every guy, but some of the guys that people say, what about this guy? I'm like, he hasn't camped again. Last time he camped in Athens, he was a rising sophomore. So.
We've talked about that speed. The speed when they clock you and then at camp is everything. Georgia. There's two defensive backs that I think both of them signed with Alabama last year. That Georgia was concerned about their speed, both of them. And
a guy that they're not concerned about his speed and they're not going to force to camp is Travis Smith Jr. We're talking about the wide receivers, and this is a guy who's on that list. We seem to talk about him every week because Georgia's trying to land a couple of them. He and Tylen Taylor were in town. And give me your thoughts on Travis Smith real quick, because I don't think. Let me scroll down here and let's see how many forecasts do we have to Georgia. There's a few there on there. So Sam Spiegelman's got one in there. I've got one in there. Lance has one. So it looks like everybody but Trent has predicted Travis Smith is going to wind up in this class. Did Georgia improve, maintain, lose ground? What's going on with Travis Smith Jr.?
Hold on, I'm going to put a future cast in. Hey, go ahead, Lance.
Well, you can share your screen if you need to there. So. All right, Lance, while he's screwing around in the –
I'm in.
Yeah, you in?
I'm in. All right. I think this is one that I would say, going back to KJ Bolden last year, I would be surprised if he's not in Georgia's class at this point. And I thought already.
There, folks. There's Trent's future cast live on the air.
I would be surprised if he wasn't in this class. I think if you give me the field, I would bet against that. I know betting is illegal these days, around the sports, but I would put my money on Georgia. But stuff like the relationships has been there. They've had a wide receiver coaching change. Georgia's remained in that pole position, and there's a lot of stuff that's factored into it. It's the relationships dating back to his freshman year, and Kirby Smart has been there, and they've had the offense coordinator change, but I think he feels comfortable in Athens. His family feels comfortable in Athens for him to be there. He loves his fit in the offense. He's a need in the offense at his size. And also just his relationship with other prospects in this class. I think he has a relationship. There's a lot of prospects in that Alpharetta, Westlake, that area where Ethan Barbour and all those guys are really close. And I think that's playing a big role as well, just teaming up in Athens. So I think there's a lot in Georgia's favor. It's another guy that I think he will take his visits, but I definitely see Georgia being hard to beat at this point.
Mm-hmm. I'll kind of reiterate what Jed said a few shows ago, and even when I talked to Travis at that 7-on-7 camp I went to back in early March, this was like right after Brian McClendon left, who he had like a real tight relationship with, and I was standing there with some other reporters, and we asked him just about James Coley, and what are your thoughts on him, and he was like, and I've said this about a few receivers too, and he was like, Coley like texted me like only a few hours after he got the job, so like the day of, and told him that Georgia's still gonna pursue him hard, and that he's one of the top priorities in this class. And I think that Travis has been to Georgia a few times this spring. I believe he attended a spring practice, and Jed caught up with him, and Jed basically said that him and Coley are the fit seems to be good between those two guys. So I think that there's like Trent said, if I was a betting man, I'd end up with him in this class as well.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You guys, I don't put in a ton of future casts. But that's one I feel pretty comfortable about. I guess CJ Wiley's due up next, and it'll be Georgia's trying to get them back to back. But the other kid that was more interesting, I'll say more interesting to me, but it was more we haven't talked about as much, was in town this weekend, and all these guys salivating over his really pretty mom. And he's take a step back, but Tylan Taylor, I assume, 6'1" receiver, 180 pounds. Taylor seemed to have a really good trip to Athens. Where's he on the depth chart, or on the want chart, if you will?
That one is there's just a slew of receivers, and I think honestly, there's
like 8.
Yeah, and I think Taylor has been kind of the guy that's been there the longest, I would say. I think he visited back in the spring, I believe. But he's kind of been the guy that's just been in the picture the longest when you're talking about all these other guys. A couple of California wide receivers popped up. Some other guys have popped up here and there, but Taylor's kind of been in the picture for a while now, and I think he is definitely a priority. I think he's a take. I think there's some other guys that might be borderline just because of numbers, not because of ability or rankings or whatever, but I think Taylor is one of those guys that they really want. I think other than the 2 in-state receivers and I guess 3 in-state receivers, 1 commit, and 2 they want, Wiley and Travis Smith, I would say Taylor's right there at the top, being a priority amongst the group of receivers.
It does feel like every time we would mention we would do a CJ Wiley update or a Travis Smith update or anybody else, we'd go down that list of not extra, but other possible receivers and talk about how they're only going to take like 4, but there are 8 on their short list, if you will. And we'd always mention Taylor, and we didn't talk about him as much, but now he's actually been to town. I got to think that you give James Coley an official visit, he's going to work you. He's going to work it. So I'm liking Georgia's chances here more. Get your thoughts, Lance.
Of course, I think he's going to take a few other visits, but I think a team to watch, other than Georgia is Ohio State. I think Jed kind of mentioned they've entered the picture, and I talked to a couple people around the program that are worried about a school like that coming in and possibly getting their hooks in them, and you see with a lot of these wide receiver recruits that we talk to, And we say this, about every time we talk about wide receivers, is there's negative recruiting against Georgia in the passing game. And I forgot what specific receiver it was, the Jetter I talked to, or maybe Trent, who basically said that they looked up the passing stats themselves, and maybe I think it was on a recent visit that even Georgia showed them. I think it was over the scavenger hunt that hey, from Georgia's perspective, they're saying, hey, we're Carson Beck
wide out.
Yeah, Carson Beck was like second in the SEC and in certain passing categories, and may have been the leader in some of them. Definitely top 3 for sure. And that kind of I think that narrative is a little bit flipping, but with him being a kid from Illinois, it's really hard to tell right now, but he's definitely a take, and he's definitely in that top percent of guys that they want.
I think there's 3 wide receivers that would commit tomorrow, but are not takes yet. And I think Taylor is one, and I think they're waiting to see what happens. Let's let the Travis Smith domino fall. Let's see the CJ Wiley domino fall. Let's see what Taylor does. And then that opens it up for like 3 other guys who could get in.
Yeah, and I think numbers are still uncertain as well, because you're looking at guys that, yes, you could have a large turnover after this class because of those transfers that you brought in, on top of some other seniors, on the roster, Arian Smiths and those guys. But you could also have a few of those guys return, which is going to limit those numbers, which you could have transfers as well. So I think numbers is still an uncertain thing. And me and Jed have discussed that, I think it was last week or a couple weeks ago, that we thought 3 at the minimum, but I think you could get to 4 in this class. With numbers working right, I don't think you get to 5 because Georgia's used the transfer portal for those additional spots. But I think 4 is 3 or 4 is definitely the number. And I think, of course, Wiley and Smith are the cream of the crop.
Yeah, that's a good point. Opposite side, the guys who might wind up covering some of these safeties. This has just, to me, been a fascinating story about how Lagunza Hayward was no longer on Georgia's. I don't say war; it wasn't on the board, but it just didn't seem to. We didn't talk about him hardly at all. Now all of a sudden, this kid. This is a big deal, Lance. Tell folks about the safety out of Toombs County.
Yeah, went to go see him a few weeks ago. Talked to him before his visit. He was excited. I think a week prior to that, he talked to Georgia for the first time, I think, in like several months. I believe they offered him late February, and then it just went cold. And I've been high on this kid for a while. And when we saw him, when I finally got a chance to, I met him in the state basketball championships in March, but the next month in April, when we had our rivals camp in Atlanta, he was like, Georgia's not really, in the picture. They haven't really been in contact with me at all. And he was kind of like, he was kind of distraught because, he didn't really grow up a huge Georgia fan. I think FSU's his dream school, but I think he was pretty high when he came to visit for junior day and was real impressed. And then when he got that offer, and then when Georgia didn't contact him, he was just kind of distraught. And, less than a month after that, maybe it was like not even 2 weeks, Shavars Robinson shows up at his practice, and that kind of put Georgia right back in it. And I talked to him today on the phone, and he got a little bit more clarity on that. And they just kind of wanted to like Trent says, it's a marathon, not a sprint. In terms of them. I don't think he was a take. Up until Robinson went and visited him at practice, and he saw what kind of a player he was on the field, what kind of a leader. And I think that really, helped him set up this official visit, because this didn't have like at that rivals camp on April 20th, he didn't have an official visit set up for Georgia. He actually, I think, canceled his to Alabama for this one. So the Tide are out of the picture, and now the Dogs are right back in it.
And you think you look back and you don't think a lot of these people are they'd say, well, how are rankings based on these shorts and t-shirt and stuff like that? But I think that is when the that's when the communication picked up. Right after Rivals Camp, right after some film got out, right after some, showing his coverage ability. I literally wasn't sure he'd be, because I thought he killed a guy at that camp.
Yeah,
But
that's true. Yeah, we were thinking he might have been up on charges.
but he is he is your typical safety. He's not a guy that's going to play cornerback. He could walk down and play some star in some heavier set stuff, but he is a true safety, and he will clean your clock. Like he will. He's the Lewis Seen type safety, but he did impress me with his coverage ability, in his one-on-one ability. And we know Georgia likes to put their safeties in one-on-one matchups. We've seen it with Lewis Seen. We saw it with Chris Smith and Malachi Starks, and those guys. They'll match those safeties up with a slot receiver. So he definitely has the ability to cover that one-on-one, but he is definitely a safety that will come up and hit you.
I said that camp he was Sean Williams.
Yeah. And let me add, I didn't realize that him and, DeMello Jones, who's now at Georgia, are like really good friends. I've talked to him like 5 or 6 times. He's never mentioned that before. And today he just kind of,
by the way.
Yeah. And he was like, I asked him, I was like, so who did you spend time with? And he was like, well, I got to spend time with DeMello Jones, who's one of my like really good friends. And I was like, you never said that before. He goes, oh yeah, he's from Swainsboro. And I was like, yeah, that's South Georgia, that's Southeast Georgia. Y'all are right near each other. And I don't know if they grew up, playing ball together. They just know each other from camp, something like that. But he said that DeMello shot it to him straight and said, listen, this is how it is. And I think that he really, really liked, Georgia's message to him this weekend, just about that process and, how they wanted to, see what kind of kid he was like. And I think he had a lot of respect for that. So
when you're putting defensive backs in the high up in the NFL draft too, I said this back before, when Georgia was having the problem recruiting defensive linemen, and I said it's just going to take 1 year that Georgia puts multiple guys in the NFL where it blows up. And now it's kind of turned into what Alabama was doing back in 2011, 12, 13, where you're putting multiple guys in the first round every year, for multiple guys in the first 2 rounds every year. And you're starting to see, you talk about Hayward, grew up as a Florida State fan, but, a lot of these guys, it's a business decision from a standpoint that, hey, they can put me in the NFL. Look at their numbers, whether they got the numbers to show it over the past 5-6 years. So I think that is a big aspect. And I know Hayward's mentioned NIL is not a big thing. NIL is not a factor. And I think NIL is going to be a factor for every player. But at the same time, they're looking at these things. They're looking at, God, they can put me in the NFL in 3 or 4 years, and look what money I can make doing that. So I think that is a huge factor with these defensive backs.
Mm-hmm.
You guys mind if I go on a rant?
Go ahead.
You check your phone, you check your messages, but y'all bear with me. Andy, Eric, Derek, Tom, Bobby, David Rosenberg, all the folks in the chat there, y'all bear with me here. Because what Trent said reminded me of, I'll go back to like Raekwon McMillan. I remember going down interviewing him, and I'm like, you talk about Georgia, you say they're going to be there till the end, but he's like, yeah, it's just not for me. And you would go talk to a ton of kids. So he was like the outlier who Georgia just wasn't. It was too provincial for him. And love Raekwon, great guy, does wonders for his hometown. We'll never say a bad word about him. Great kid. Then Count right after him, kind of, who is his protege, if you will, comes to Georgia when Georgia's hot. There are a lot of kids that we spoke to over the years that Georgia was their dream school growing up, but they weren't getting defensive linemen in the league. They weren't getting wide receivers in the league. It hurt them. There's a kid like, to what Trent said, I love Georgia. I've been a Georgia fan my whole life, but I'm going to go to Alabama because they put guys in the league. I'm going to go to Clemson because they get this type of player in the league. They get defensive linemen in the league. I'm going to Ohio State because they get wide receivers and linebackers in the league. There were just certain areas where Georgia was deficient. I think Kirby was grinding his teeth going through the first round of the NFL draft this year going, take lad. Give me a first round draft pick. Just give me one. give me one, and we can write our own ticket when it comes to wide receivers. And I mean, Ladd almost made it there, but the development they've seen of him, and like you said, once you started getting, when you had Trayvon Walker go first overall, when you had Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt, now you are on the cusp of getting all these big defensive linemen and safeties and cornerbacks as well. They see how many guys are going to the league. They see that you've put in 3 and 4 guys drafted at certain positions. It's just going to stack up. And say the same thing about offensive linemen. You're starting to get those in there. So, end of my rant. Appreciate everybody putting up with me. But again, it's just something we've seen, because when we talk to these kids, and we would come to the vault at UGASports and say, this kid, when he talked about Georgia, raved about it. By the way, he's going to Clemson. People would be like, what the hell? He's a legacy. Yeah, well, he's going to Clemson because he just doesn't have faith that the Mark Richt team or the assistant coaches there are going to get him to the league. And now Kirby's got him everywhere. So
yeah, and you look at tight end. And when the tight end recruiting pick up, Darnell, Brock Bowers. When that happened, look what blew up right behind them. Look at all the guys. I mean, Todd Hartley was like, I got those 2 guys. That's going to recruit itself over the next 4 years, 4 or 5 years. I mean, and beyond. So it's just that they're building that reputation. They've built that reputation with NFL scouts already. I mean, you look at the Eagles, you look at other teams around the league that they look at Georgia. Georgia's the team that if Georgia's having a combine, they're all going to be there. So Georgia's having a practice.
Specialists drafted, man. Come on.
Yeah. You're seeing it's turning into basically an NFL pipeline because number one, they're ready to play in the NFL day one because of how they practice, how they condition, all the things, and then number two, they're on the field. They're ready as well because they've been in the spotlight because they're playing in big games. They're playing in the playoffs. They're playing in championships. And these are top-rated kids, and all these top-rated kids want to play together. So, I think it's just a huge thing that Kirby's built, and that's the main reason he's built a machine is he's getting those first-round picks, he's getting those high draft picks, and then when he gets them throughout, and like you said, he's waiting on that wide receiver. When he gets that one wide receiver, and I think Ladd, you can build off Ladd as well. Wide receivers going to take off, and I think wide receivers is the only thing lacking taking off as far as recruiting the wide receiver position.
I'm with you there. Now, Lagonza Hayward goes from Georgia didn't talk to me for a few months to now, Lance, I think you have them in maybe his top 2?
Yeah, I'd say so.
All right. Well, I want to mention this guy here. And now that we got Jed joining us, I want to bring up Nikolai Brooks, 6'8", 385 pounds. I don't care if we have him over. Let's say that's generous. Let's say he's only 6'7", only 350. That's still pretty good out of Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Jed, now all of a sudden we weren't talking about Nikolai Brooks. Now he's got Georgia basically in his top 3. So tell us a little bit about Brooks and why all of a sudden Georgia's in the running there.
Yeah, well, a couple years ago, Georgia was one of his, if I remember right, one of his first maybe 5 offers. He is originally from Iowa, spent some time living in Georgia, and now, of course, is back in Iowa. Was committed to Iowa and decommitted, I think, in November. And he was like, "Yeah, me and Coach Stacy Searles talk every week. I got a great relationship with Kirby Smart." And again, like you said, Roddy, he's a guy who's kind of gotten lost in the shuffle a bit as far as offensive line targets go. With David Sanders and Zaire Addison's been a hot name, and
Juan Gaston.
Josh Petty, Juan Gaston, all these other guys. And then like you said, you got the the sun gets blocked out in Athens on Friday afternoon. You're like, whoa, that's because Nick Brooks showed up. So the message is what you tell these other guys: you come to Athens, be developed by the best, and go play in the NFL. And top 3. I don't think I was dead by any means. I think he's told me he's got official visits set to Texas and I believe USC the next 2 weeks, and he's committing September 8th. So a little bit later than some of these other guys. So September 8th, you won't.
Oh, we lost Jed for a second there. Jed said something about September 8th. If he's committing,
That's his commitment date.
yeah. So he's committing on September 8th. I think I was just looking at his other visits. He does have one set to Iowa June 21st. So previous commitment there. This kid is an absolute monster. That's just you can't coach that size.
No.
6'8", 385. Trent, how many guys have you seen that size?
Well, not
I mean,
many.
we got like Amarius Mims, who was never even that big.
Isaiah Wilson, but he wasn't 6'8".
No, I'm trying to think of who is the big kid that came in with Jacob Eason? Ben Cleveland.
Benson, but I'm thinking if you put
they never had that much
Nikolai Brooks and Juan Gaston next to each other.
Put him next to Daniel Calhoun.
Williams on the outside.
Oh yeah, I mean those two with Daniel Calhoun, they would just you only need 3 offensive linemen. You wouldn't even need the other 2.
It's not even fair. Not even fair.
I mean, how tall is Elias Williams?
He's 6'7" and a half.
Yeah,
6'7" somewhere there.
Yeah, around 6'7".
I'm just thinking if you're Ball State, you're walking up there and you're seeing those guys lined up. Because again, Amarius Mims, you could see, I don't say fear in defensive players' eyes, but when they walked out, they're like, man, I'm a 5 technique, I'm a 7 technique, and you got to look at this big old monster. How the hell am I supposed to get past those arms? Or the guys that get tangled up with their screen and his long arms. I'm just
20 years ago, we didn't see no 6'8", 385 offensive linemen. What are we going to see in 20 more years?
Hopefully I'll be long retired.
7 foot, 420. I mean,
well, look at the NBA. How big it's gotten. It's
crazy.
Mind-boggling. Yeah. Yeah, I like this. They all got to sit at the bottom of the team photo. The guys, they sit crisscross on the field on the field level, but they're still they're listed not on the first level, but they're listed on the second row. As tall as those boys are, so that's a pretty big kid. They got a bunch of I like this. You got to have a bunch of Shaqs on offensive tackle the next 10 years. It's getting insane out there, but anyway, that so the update that we had from Jed there before we lost him was that Nikolai Brooks puts Georgia in his top 3. So,
yeah,
that's pretty good. You got to read the update at UGASports.com. It's a very good update on him. We're going to finish up here with the Ryan Montgomery. Let's bring out the quarterback who gets to stand behind all these guys, who was here in Athens trying to bring in, all these offensive targets, and I'm sure he worked on defensive guys too. Apparently Montgomery had an absolute blast. This goes from a guy who we were talking about who's a take and who isn't, and waiting for those dominoes to fall. He was chomping at the bit to commit to Georgia, finally gets it. Now he's the conductor trying to put together a class. Trent, Lance, give me your thoughts on Ryan and how his weekend went.
I think, the blast comes from just a relief standpoint from all his visits leading up to that visit has been, am I gonna get a green light? Where do I stand on the board? Kind of, am I behind Juju? Kind of all these things. And now you come and you're a commit. You're coming with 6'8", 385-pound offensive lineman. It's just it was an opportunity to come and just be himself, and live how he's going to live the next 3 or 4 years, and be able to be on the other side of the recruiting standpoint, not being the recruited. He can be the recruiter now, yeah. And I think that's more the relief from his standpoint, and just being able to enjoy the process and try to bring as many high caliber prospects in with him as possible.
I think if I've got his tweet notifications on, I mean, he's like up under like everybody's tweets. Go Dogs, come join the brotherhood, something like that. And I think when I talked to Elias Williams,
it's public. Imagine how much he's doing behind the scenes.
Yeah. And I remember talking to Elias Williams when I went down there to Camden County last month, and I was like, got a chance to talk to Ryan Montgomery yet? He was like, oh yeah, he was one of the first ones to be in contact, and he's him and Bo Walker, making sure Elias is kind of in this class. And then when you talk to even Laganza said today that Ryan Montgomery came up to him and they talked, they bonded. I think he's doing a good job of selling Georgia, and I think that he wanted to be at Georgia long before he committed, and I mean it shows. And so he's kind of the front man for this class in terms of being a hype man, and trying, like you said, trying to land as many guys to protect him, and as many guys he can deliver the ball to as well.
And one thing that I've seen a lot of comparisons to Jake Fromm on the board, and I was about to make one. Yeah. While I don't think his game necessarily is Jake Fromm, because I think number one, Ryan's taller than Jake. I think Ryan has more velocity on his ball than Jake on certain balls. Now, touch wise, I could see that, but I think being a leader on the field and being that guy off the field, kind of like Jake Fromm was, bringing in all those guys, having all those recruits at his house, I think that is where the two are similar. I think Ryan is going to build relationship after relationship, and I think his family is as well. And I think they're going to leave no stone unturned to try to bring in the most elite guys with them in this class. So I think that is a comparison to Jake Fromm that, from that standpoint.
And that's kind of why I was about to make the same thing. I'm like, look, I don't want to get into release points and hit turns and football IQ. I'm not the expert on stuff like that, but I do know when a guy's beating the bushes to bring in other players. And Fromm was doing it. I mean, he and LeCount, the way they led that class, and that set the table for Georgia's success later on. If you have a Ryan Montgomery out there who's like, look, man, I've been fighting to get to Georgia. This is where I want to be. I'm a incredibly talented quarterback. If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you. Hey, Brooks, come be my left tackle at 6'8", 385 pounds. Elias, go deep. I got you here. Just the different running backs. He's talking up Travis Smith Jr. while he's here. I'm sure he'll be on the phone or texting C.J. Wiley when he's in town. He got a chance to work with Taylor. Talking to him this weekend. That is a guy who was. Again, I'm not trying to give too much credit to quarterbacks. You can have anybody on. Ethan Barber, we know, is a tight end. He's been very vocal in trying to put this class together. But football players, we from day one, we look to our quarterback for leadership because we get in the huddle, and that's the guy calling the plays.
And Brooks is up in Big Ten country with Montgomery, and that's another thing because they're Ohio and Iowa. Same as Taylor.
You got Iowa, Illinois. I mean, he could bring the Midwest to Georgia. Bring a big old tackle, a wide receiver. There's a bunch of them. So, I think we got Jed back. All right, Jed. You got back just in time as we're about to finish up the show. But give us your overall thoughts, and with that, we will we'll let Jed have the last word about how this weekend went.
Yeah, my first and last word of the show. No, I mean, again, I think I said this last time we did a show. I think this weekend was a huge opportunity to cement and I guess strengthen leads that we've thought Georgia's held for a lot of guys. You throw Travis Smith in that category. I'd put Zane Walker in that category. God, who's the other one I'm missing? Juan Gaston in that category. So, and I think they did a good job of that. Who just called me was Darren Ickenagman, the commit, who originally had an official visit to Ohio State coming up this weekend, and he told me, like, yeah, nope, that visit's off the books. I shut down my recruitment. It is it's done. So
are you breaking that news
here? Keep in the fold. So yeah, there we go. That's what happens when
that's why we had Jed come on last. He had news to break.
And that's big because he's a guy, we said it when he committed. He's a guy who was really high on the board there at edge, outside linebacker, whatever.
You're supposed to drop the mic on that one and just log off.
I wish I had one. But I think, it's like some of the guys that were there this weekend, whether it's Nick Brooks, who's kind of a wild card, Lagonza Hayward. I'm sure you mentioned it when you talked about him, Lance, but his recruitment with Georgia's like kind of been up and down, and now it seems really trending upwards pretty well. So yeah, I think it was a good weekend. It's a good start to June, and I think you're gonna look back at this weekend and see, there was I think 5 commits maybe out of the 14 guys that were there. I think you're gonna end up with close to 10 of these guys on board by the time you look at this thing said and done. Maybe 11 or 12, just because I think that's what this weekend could turn into. I mean, I'm sure y'all have mentioned him. I think Georgia's got a good shot with Travis Smith, Isaiah Gibson, Justice Terry, Juan Gaston, that's 9. If you get Kevin Wynn, that's 10. Zayden Walker, 11. Getting
Hayward.
Hayward would get you to 12. I mean, you got a chance to get whatever 85-90% of the guys who were in town this weekend. And I think this weekend has really set the foundation for. I mean, that's half your class.
12 out of 14.
Yeah, I mean that's more or less half your class who could have taken their official visits this weekend when it's all said and done. So, good start to June, and only more coming up this weekend.
That is a perfect recap. We will end with this question here from David Rosenberg. Says, "Hi guys, I was looking forward to y'all's all weekend for y'all's updates. This time last year, Georgia had like 18 commits. Are you worried about the number of commits and what do you see after the month of June and July?" And I think that what you just ran over there, the list of all those guys. I mean, you could be adding 7 more that were in town this weekend.
Yeah, and there's so
any
many
concerns,
guys, there's so many guys who have set commitment dates in July on this list and some other targets too. There's commitment dates all over the place. It looks like there was last year. There was that stretch of 4 commits in 4 days or 5 in a row, something like that, toward the beginning of July last year. So it's gonna be there's going to be a lot. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it got up to 18 commits by the end of July, if not more, just with how many dates are set. Guys who might not even have dates set and just pop out of nowhere. It's going to be a busy next 7 weeks or so for sure.
I think the number's lower this year because of the in-state, how talented the in-state is, and Georgia. Not necessarily trying to push those guys to commit, letting them have their time. And I think you look back at the past couple of years, they've recruited in state, of course, but they focus more on out-of-state guys. And with the in-state guys, I think you're going to see more summer, fall decisions because you've focused on those guys. You can land 75-80% of your class in state, and Kirby hadn't done that and probably since he's been at the University of Georgia. So I think that's one of the reasons.
Quick note to Michael Foster says, "Hey, like 17 years ago, you came to Columbus to do a meet and greet at El Vaquero. Come back down. We'll take good care of you. I'm not far from Columbus. I can be there in about 30 minutes. So if you're buying margaritas, I will come speak to that club."
I thought that said as El Vaquero. I don't know if Roddy had like a wrestling persona or something he puts on when he goes and talks to these touchdown clubs and stuff.
Luchador, man. I'm all over it. All right, folks, with Jed's news there on Darren, that's a pretty good close. And I think you summed up the class perfectly, or at least the weekend. Real quick, who's coming in this weekend that we'll be talking about next week?
I don't have my list in front of me. Bryce Davis from North Carolina, the edge defensive end. That's a big one. Eric Winters, who we all saw at the Rivals camp, that kid is so freaking good. David Sanders,
CJ Wiley
visit this weekend. CJ Wiley is this weekend. I want to say
running back.
Let me look at my list. I got it written down. I want to say Todd Robinson is maybe this weekend. Let me see. I got my list here. Christian Garrett's this weekend. Marion Dye, Tavion Wallace, a guy you talked to a lot, Lance. Dontrell Glover, speaking of in-state guys and offensive lineman out of Langston Hughes. Todd Robinson is this weekend. Derek Meadows, a receiver from Bishop Gorman out in Arizona or Vegas or wherever that is. A guy who's another one of these guys who kind of is flying under the radar receiver, but a guy that Georgia's obviously in good enough shape with to get an OB. So
they also got them ties to that Vegas area.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because every weekend this month the talent seems pretty fairly evenly spread out over each weekend this month. But yeah, another big group coming in this weekend.
Awesome. All right, folks. Next Monday night, 8:30, we'll be back. We'll be breaking down the second big official weekend of June. And so do not miss out. If you would, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and ideally, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and drop in there and give us a review. We hardly ever ask anybody to do reviews, but we would like to actually get a few more reviews in there. If you don't like the show, don't leave a review. But if you do like the show, do so. All right. For Trent Smallwood, Jed May, and Lance McCurley, I'm Rodney DeBulsey. We will see you next week. Y'all take care.